very, very excited to talk about personalization in the age of ad tech and martech. There's a lot of buzzwords that go around in marketing, especially when it comes to technology. And we're all after the same holy grail, which is personalization. It's efficiently going after the customer, hitting them up at the right time, the right place, with the right message, the right content, using the right vehicle. So we've assembled a superhero team here today that round off the whole realm of personalization. And I'll just do a brief introduction with everyone here. So starting off with Vitaly, he is the CEO, founder of StackAdapt. They're an advertising platform that helps brands accelerate customer engagement and acquisition. StackAdapt was rated as one of the 50 top growth companies by Canadian Business this year. No small feat. And Vitaly was previously named a 30 under 30, so I'm aiming for my 30 after 30. Still working on it. Haven't heard anything yet. So next is Alex. Alex is our veteran, our media veteran. She's been CEO of media agency Starcom and MediaVest. Has also worked in high-level executive positions for brands like CBC, the National Post, Coca-Cola, and Procter & Gamble. She also works extensively with a lot of tech startups and is very, very familiar with the tech startup sphere. We've got Igna as the next one. He works for Points. He is the manager of Making It Happen, self-proclaimed, or is that on your business card? Okay, good. So they're really interesting because they're in the loyalty game, and a lot of us in marketing kind of put loyalty in the back burner. We're all about customer acquisition, even though we know that the cost of acquisition is much greater than retention of our current customers. So I think there's going to be some interesting things coming from Igna. There's a little bit of a connection to our next panelists. Both Mika and Izaz were on a championship soccer team together. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. We all know Izaz. I don't really need to give you a big intro, but G Adventures obviously is a huge player in the adventure travel space for multi-day tours. And I think obviously for me the coolest thing about G is that they're homegrown here in Toronto in Canada. Success story for 27 years strong. So great to have you guys all on board. Can't wait to get into this discussion a little bit. So let's get into the first question. So the customer, this is one I'm going to ask all of you. Feel free if you want to jump in on this one, if you want to make a pass, that's all good. And then I'll have some specific questions afterwards. So the customer experience bar has been set higher in recent years. Brands like Airbnb, Amazon, Uber have been able to achieve this by leveraging data. And they use a very customer-centric approach. What in your experiences have been other examples out there? And feel free, since this is the initial question, to use some of the companies that you might have worked for yourselves.
Sure, I'm happy to start. So I'm going to open by just saying, I think what's interesting about digital is that in the travel industry, it was the first nemesis, right? The second that digital launched, whether it was Google or Facebook, the first thing that happened was price commoditization, because that's the only thing that I've worked on everything from Emirates to Airbnb to Air Canada to tons of tourism companies, and we see that almost with every nascent, like if you follow the last 20 years of the internet and you kind of compare it to what happens in travel, that's one of the issues. So personalization is obviously, and I have a very specific point of view from an agency perspective, and I think you have to make sure that you are doing both individual but also focusing on scale and brand. And while there are lots of options to do personalization at scale, I would argue that the ROI and every bit of research I've seen from Boston McKinsey to Google Think to many of the ad partners that I bought and tracked will all say that you need to do a balance of both. So in the area of customer experience, which is what the question is about, and obviously, growing up with Spotify, growing up with Amazon, growing up with, Airbnb recommendations, and really sort of thoughtful uses of like the last thing you loved is the next thing you might love. If you love sports, you're going to love more sports. If you love going to Costa Rica, you may want to go there again. I think that that's important and really, you know, kind of the first marker of personalization, and brands that are doing it well, my experience, you know, Emirates and Cathay Pacific are two really great examples where they did a tremendous amount of profiling of their most important customers, the super high-end, the super expensive, so that they were able to, when John bought a first-class ticket from Toronto to Dubai, they were able to profile John's history and understand that John was a red wine drinker, he loved a cab, he loved seafood, he loved, and when he sat down in, you know, seat A2, he was offered up things that they knew he would like, and then they prompted him to talk about it post, right? And I think that, that's one kind of great example.
I think that the number one company in this space is Amazon. Absolutely. They're the ones who have been creepily recommending stuff over to us for years, and I think that that's the one that really the public that was the first taste that you got that this is a thing. I also think that Netflix do an outstanding job. I think there's so many memes out there, which is, are you still there? And everyone's like, yeah, Netflix, I'm still here. They're the ones who really get that right as well. And I actually think eBay were a very early adopter of this as well. So the kind of things that you were bidding on was definitely, then you would see things similar to that popping up. So it would be like Amazon, again, like, because you like this, buy this. So I'd say that there's the three that stand out to me.
I'd like to add, I think it's easy to make personalization in the context of digital world. You know, we talk about Amazon or Netflix, that's easy. You know, with travel it's more hard because you typically have the actual experience happening way beyond the actual booking of the trip. Yeah, we can, you know, maybe deliver relevant content to people who visited particular pages on your website. That's great, but the problem happens when you're done booking the experience, then you actually going on your travel. That's when things start to break. I was in Vegas 10 days ago, and we arrived at 1 a.m. in the morning. And you know, booking part was easy, but we arrived exhausted. It's like 4 a.m. Eastern time. And then we have to stand in line for half an hour to get our room keys because apparently that technology doesn't exist in 2017. So as you can imagine, you know, the teams that are responsible for selling these rooms clearly is not held accountable to people who actually implement the technology of giving the rooms out to people who book the rooms. So that's the challenge I would see in personalization in travel.
I was just going to say, sort of along the same lines, I think it's at the intersection of digital, online and offline, where the most interesting things can happen. And I'll give you one example. Hilton is one of our top partners at Points, and the kind of thing that they do is they came up with a brand of hotels that's actually focused on millennials. And they have inside the room, they have things like fitness. They call it the 5 feet to fitness, where you can actually exercise in the room and whatnot. So they've personalized everything all the way to the room and the way the room looks like, and they're using the room as a way to as the utmost extension of your personality. And I think that's where it's really, really interesting with what we can do now with personalization.
I'm going to add one more. I just thought of another one. Iberia Airlines did a really interesting thing. You know, this is a lot about how you use adaptive creative. But what they did was they took their customer base and emailed them and asked them the question, what is your dream trip and who would you want to take it with? And then they asked for the email of the person that your dream trip you wanted to take with. So what they did was, like, if I said I wanted to go to, I don't know, Bala, and Shane was the person that I included in my email, they would send a personalized ad to Shane that would say, hey Shane, it's Christmas time and Alex really wants to go to Bala. Will you take her? Here's this great experience. Now, that cost a lot of money. I know this, they were our client. The ROI was horrific, like it was terrible, but it did give them a tremendous amount of momentum. And actually, revenue for that period was up. It just wasn't up directly related to that. Like we tagged that particular experience. It wasn't directly. So it helped top growth. It didn't help necessarily bottom for that program. But it was a great example of how the creative landscape also needs to be linked within the personalization tech platforms.
Very cool, very cool. Azaz, how does GeoVentures market to its customers using ad tech?
So, actually, show of hands, how many people are actually working in marketing at the moment? Okay, so yeah, not too many in the room. It's not going to be rocket science to say which major platforms we use. We use Google and we use Facebook. They're the two biggest that we use to target customers. So I think that one of the things is they do it better than everyone else in regards to how, well, they're two separate. So the thing with Google is obviously you're going in and you're searching for a specific query, and then Facebook, again, if you thought Google was creepy, the way Facebook is able to target people is insane. So I would say that the majority of our budget goes towards those two platforms.
Very cool. Vitali, StackAdapt uses billions of points of data, and you use machine learning to kind of sift through it and get consumer behavior. Can you just let us know a little bit more about what you guys do and what it can relate to this crowd as well?
Yeah, I think machine learning is very overhyped, and I think everybody and their grandma are doing machine learning. But with us, it's just a how. At the end of the day, if we don't solve fundamental problems for our customers, then all of this work is meaningless. So yes, we use machine learning, but that's just one of the ways we can actually deliver on results for our customers. So if the ultimate objective for our technology is to get more customers for our clients, then if we're not able to do it in a cost that makes sense to them, then it doesn't work, right? At the end of the day, for GeoVentures, it's the same way, right? If Google is not driving you relevant cost per acquisition that makes sense for you, then you'll drop them tomorrow and you'll find a new channel.
Is anyone from Google here? Yeah, we drop them tomorrow. Yeah, it's just the most effective still at the moment. Just to point that in regards to the data bit though, we use a lot of data as well. We actually work with a really cool company, also Toronto-based, called Environics Analytics. So we actually mapped 5 years of our data across their customer segments. So we actually have, we thought we were doing data well, and then we used the Canadian region as a test to see if we actually take this data and work with a company that's actually specializing in segmenting using data from existing sources, how much bigger we can make it. So at the moment, yeah, what was originally still somewhat 2000s marketing, where we were doing by demographic or by age, or sometimes even thinking that we knew what the customer wanted, we can actually now turn the new data that we have into what kind of media they're listening to. And also another really cool thing is lookalikes audiences, for example. So now, because we have certain data and we now know how other people that look like this data work, we can actually target them for that. So even when I said the Google and Facebook answer, I know that sounds like a very 101 answer, but at the end of the day, if you actually get into how intricate those two platforms are, I don't really think you need anything else personally.
So I'm going to jump in. So coming from an agency perspective, so I would say for every dollar spent in our agency, 50% was digital, and of that, probably 70% was Google and Facebook. And to a certain degree, I think that was a bit of a mistake, right? I think that there are many companies out there that are doing attribution-based modeling. StackAdapt is one of them. There are many in Canada and Toronto, particularly, that are doing an excellent job, and I would highly encourage you to test. One of the biggest lessons that I learned is don't just look at the behavior of the consumer as what drives your sales. Like as an example, 10 years ago, we all used Facebook likes as a measure of outcomes, right? We thought if someone likes me, then I'm going to sell a lot, right? Burger King would measure our agency performance based on the number of likes we had. And it took about 5 years to realize that was a completely bullshit metrics, because it has nothing to do with that. So I've used lots of, social influencing, television, all the digital means, and depending on the problem you're solving, and I think you said this, and I think this is exactly right. What is it exactly you're trying to do? Are you trying to close, or are you trying to build your brand? Then there's a media platform, an ad tech platform, and a MarTech platform that can support that, and not everything works for every problem. A great example for me is, that there were, like Emirates didn't have success on Facebook. They did have success on certain platforms for the specific problem, and we would never have gotten to that unless we tested. The other thing that I think is incredibly important is the difference between the data, first, second, and third party. And I'm sure I'm not gonna go through that, most of you know what that is. First party data is golden data, it's your data. Your next customer looks like your best customer 60% of the time. How brands grow, though, is inspiring the rest. And in travel, that's the big, if there's one thing that I've kind of learned is, yes, your next customer looks like your best customer. People that like to go to Costa Rica, find more of them. But how do you inspire Asia? How do you inspire the next trip? How do you inspire things that are more expensive and more lucrative? You've got to set a wide net. So you need to manage that with a top of funnel and bottom of funnel synergistic play that works together. And you really need to deploy that ad tech and MarTech partnership based on the problems that you're trying to solve.
Perfect. Thank you. Meetna, I want to jump in a little bit into the loyalty side of things, because like I mentioned in the beginning, I know in several companies I've worked for, we've kind of ignored the loyalty portion, or we've kind of put it on the back burner. And I'm wondering, what do companies, whether you're a tech startup or maybe an established business, how do you tackle the loyalty equation? And what should be your first steps and your last steps?
I think maybe to some extent it's okay, and it's probably best if you don't think about loyalty up front. A couple of weeks ago we were going out for dinner, and we walked into this restaurant. We looked at the menu and decided to walk right out. There was nothing inspiring us there, and the owner of the restaurant ran after us and said, "Hey, what are you looking for? I know you didn't find it here, but maybe I can help you find it somewhere down the street." And we talked to him. He gave us some recommendations. We ended up going to his restaurant. He happened to own the restaurant above the place. But that's not the point. The point is he wasn't out there to try to sell us. He was out there to try to, call it, not influence, but help, like generally a nice guy trying to help us. And for me, that's the kind of stuff that really gets to me in terms of, it's those kind of moments of, oh my God, like, what is this guy doing? I'm obviously not going to spend money with him. What is he doing here? And I think loyalty, that's what inspires loyalty. That's what gets people talking about your experiences. If you delight them in this way, you surprise them somehow. And that should be, I think everybody's focus. I think loyalty comes afterwards, and I think, especially as a startup, you should focus on delighting and focus on those individual moments, and that's what inspires loyalty.
So G's doing this at the moment. Our focus, I was going to say buzzword, but it's really not. Our focus for the business at the moment is total customer experience. So it obviously includes loyalty, but it's got loyalty embedded into everything you do. So it's exactly what Meekness touched on at the end, which is really delighting the customers from the minute they touch your brand for the first time to when they consume your product, and then thereafter. So I think that it'll be cool to see how that evolves within G, because we've got some cool stuff happening.
Very cool. Vitali, content. We're all producing content. I'm sure everyone here is producing content of some sort. And we're producing it at a fast and furious rate. We're throwing it up on social every which way. In your opinion, what's the best way to leverage it?
Well, fundamentally, when you create content, you have to create it with a purpose. And I think the purpose is really to solve customer problems. So be that entertainment or education or information. If customer, after they've experienced the content, don't feel like their life has been enriched, then you pretty much wasted everybody's time. I started a blog about 6 months ago, and my readership is horrendous. It spikes when I share it on social, it just really exciting, and I almost ready to sign up for #pay to be an influencer, but then I have like weeks when I have 3 readers, which is very devastating. And that's the same thing across everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a brand or an individual. Everybody struggles with distribution of content, and if you calculate ROI for the amount of time that you spend creating this content and for how many people actually read it, I think you will be pretty surprised to find out that you're wasting the time unless you're actually continuously looking for scalable ways to reach new audiences with it. I got carried away.
That was
What's the
fine.
question again?
I just leveraging content, but I think you nailed it. No, there's definitely it is a big challenge. It is a big challenge because I think a lot of people produce content for the sake of producing content and flooding the airwaves.
It doesn't work like it used to do in the past. Like in the past, you would just create a ton of content, flood search SEO with a bunch of relevant keywords. It doesn't work like that anymore, right? There's too much content. I think an average consumer has potential to see up to 3,000 articles every single day on Facebook. So you can imagine how much of it gets filtered out. So if you're fundamentally not creating something that will be shared, something that will be actually read, you may as well just not create it in the first place.
Yeah, and I'm going to add, so I think, developing a content architecture really starts with your customer. And I think someone mentioned micro moments. I think in travel, it's the category where you can literally sort of, like the clients that I worked on started the travel process sort of 4 months before, 4 to 6 months before the trip, right? So assume that that's the first micro moment. And what Google says is by the time they book a trip, they will have seen 4,000 digital interactions within that period. And so if you start with the customer and then focus on asking, what is it that you're trying to do? Are you trying to inspire them? Are you trying to sell them? Are you trying to, whatever it is that you're trying to do, influence them? Then looking at content as a science. What are, in video, it's everything from micro units to short form to long form content, and how does that fit in with the overall arc that you're trying to create? Using visuals, using storytelling, using words, using long form, and thinking through that journey. It isn't just about like the diarrhea of produce. It's about kind of really having a systematic plan. And I think especially when money is tight and you're starting a company for the first time, you're looking at how you can kind of leverage content. You've really got to start with the why, the what, and putting the process together. And sometimes it helps to have other mentors or people that you can work with that can kind of walk you through. Pattern recognition is one of the biggest advantages that some agencies, I'm not suggesting you guys work with an agency, or even consultants can deliver and give you. I think that's really important, especially when you're putting together architectures.
Great. Into Radar, when I first jumped aboard, I was surprised at how the offline sale was still prevalent. We have everything up front, we've got our content on board, we have everything built, but people still want to call and book in person. How does it fit, and this is open to the panel, how does that fit in the offline sale or offline acquisition? How does that fit in the ad tech equation?
By the way, I just realized I was talking to the microphone all this time. Sorry. Well, only about half, I think, of online booking happens online. So I think it depends on what audience you're going after. And maybe Jim Ventures can expand on this, but I would imagine the bigger the value of the sale, the more interpersonal connection people will be looking for. Be that seeing them in person or speaking on the phone. It really depends on who you're trying to go after. If you are competing in a space where the price is the only factor which consumers look into when they book, then it's all going to come down to online because it's all a function of how little can you spend to acquire a new customer. Whereas with large ticket items, it's not just the new customer acquisition, it's retention, it's the referrals, and a lot of it happens in person.
Yeah, our offline business is thriving actually. So there's 2 stories I could share. The first one is in February 2016, the senior leadership team at Ventures and a few of the marketing team, we actually went to Google's headquarters in Palo Alto. They told us this was going to happen. 18 months ago, they said, hey guys, by the way, you're going to see a bit of a decline in your online conversions because user behavior is going towards mobile, and that experience of actually completing your transaction online is actually going to be replaced by people calling. So be ready for that. And we we've been able to manage how that's looked until October this month. So this very month, we actually were getting our sales reports in day by day, and actually my boss came up to me and said, hey, like we're up crazy, but online seems to be relatively the same. Can you find out what's going on? So I went about scrambling with my team and saying, guys, like we're up, so it's a good story, but why are we up? Like we need to find out what's happening. So we compared our data with Google's data, and yeah, we found out that it wasn't really off online. And then we spoke to the director of the call center, and she wasn't as pleased. So the truth was we were having call volumes that were much higher than what we have as our expectation of our call center. So online and offline it was actually a bit more unintegrated than it is at the moment. And right now, I think that the more you can integrate the two, the better. And even, sorry, just one sec. And we actually still sell half our product through travel agents. And for example, we're still producing brochures for those guys. Now, when I first joined the business 3.5 years ago, one of the first things that I said to my boss at the time was, why are we doing brochures? Like this is a multi-$100,000 outlay. What are we thinking? And 3.5 years later, I probably would have fired myself if I had actually said that to her. And that's the way we look at it. It's like it's still online and offline for us.
I can tell you guys played on a soccer team together, just the way you're passing the mic and nudging each other.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Your call volumes in October, could that have been relative to a hurricane, an earthquake, and shooting in Vegas?
Yes, we were. I'm talking specifically from the sales calls, though. We do have service calls for sure, and they were up, but specifically the calls that were actually converted to sales, they were higher as well.
So the kind of thing that's interesting is we're looking at what the Marriotts and the Hiltons out there, what they're doing is they're investing in they're looking at Alexa, they're looking at Google Home, they're looking at these other things that are sort of bridging, again, online and offline, because that's where, you don't want to get people calling into the call center, but there's still there's a voice behind the Alexa, there's a voice behind, Siri and Google Home, so there's a bridge there. The other thing that's kind of interesting is if you look at loyalty specifically, the one thing that I'll be worried about is, let's say somebody makes a purchase offline, how am I going to be able to track them? How am I going to be able to see what they're doing? And the loyalty card number is where that thing all comes into play. So we see everything go through our platform, whether it's online or whether it's offline, because that every transaction is sort of tracked by that card number. So that's a little bit of one of our advantages, that we see everything online and offline, so it goes through the same time.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in. So all the data that I've ever seen, and I would say I'm quoting Google and I'm quoting Millward Brown and maybe Ipsos a little bit, in the travel industry 2016 data, so maybe lapping a year. Television, so it is a myth that offline does not drive. Like offline is probably one of the biggest drivers. The biggest problem with offline, and specifically television, is the attribution is so difficult because you run a TV ad, and then the TV ad runs whoever sees it or doesn't see it, and then they have to they'll go online and then we'll measure it either through Google, through search, through other things. There is technology now that's able to connect television and radio and other mediums, certainly geotargeting out of home and in lots of different ways, and we're able to connect that back to mobile and connect that back to the purchase funnel, so the top of funnel and bottom of funnel link. So I think it's a myth that all digital is the only thing you can use. Someone gave the statistic up front, I think it was Max, that said I think it was 6 or 7% of the world is blocking ads. In the US, eMarketer last month quoted it as 26% in the US. So if 26% of people, humans, are sick of advertising, in digital. And television advertising, cinema advertising, out-of-home advertising may not be as performance oriented, but it certainly isn't being blocked to the same degree. So I think, again, think about the problem you're trying to solve, be neutral about what you're using, and make sure you always start with the consumer journey. Offline has a huge role in discovery, has a huge role in kind of putting something out there, and then obviously linking it back to closing the sale.
Great. I couldn't run an ad tech panel without asking this question. Does there need to be a convergence with ad tech and martech to have true personalization? I'll open that up to the team.
I think for travel specifically, there needs to be, and that's to my earlier point, there needs to be a convergence not just with martech and adtech. There needs to be convergence across functions that deliver service way beyond their booking. The challenge with offline to online, it's like, imagine you have an Excel spreadsheet with one column, you have first names and the other one last names, and you just shuffle one of them. Like, you have no idea who these people are anymore. And that's the challenge with companies nowadays, is they, for example, they have email data, but they have no idea how to actually find these people online. Yeah, there are companies out there that can help you match these users to their online identity, like their cookies and so forth. But the match rate is so low that you're basically scrapping majority of your customers. So I would say, to answer your question, yes, there needs to be that convergence across all functions within an organization. Is it happening? Very slowly.
Yeah, and I also think, like, if you look at the ad tech, martech blur, because I mean, what's martech, what's ad tech? I look at ad tech as the things you buy, like it ends with a buy, whereas martech is more about analytics and performance. The estimates are there are 5,000 companies. Getting a single view of your customer, I mean, it's doable, and I think it's easier to do it in 2017. So in television, set-top box links to mobile phone, then links to other things, and very sophisticated companies, Vantage Analytics and others, are able to help. It's expensive, it's not easy. There was a question, one of the questions was, how simple is it to get a single view of the customer? It isn't. We have attribution issues with offline media, and we also internally, like, imagine working for a company where you had to take your email list, merge it to your online list, merge it to your mobile list, merge it to, just doing that. And I've done massive data kind of immersions for companies like TD Bank and Kraft and Air Canada. It is not, like, it is grueling and it takes forever, but once you get that, once you're able to understand, okay, Alex, she aspires to luxury travel, but she's the cheapest bitch in the world, right? So once you understand that about me, then you're able to send me the kinds of deals, the kinds of offers, the kinds of experiences that I'm more likely to convert. And if that's because we are looking for enhancing ROI, that's really the trick at being able to sort of figure out, is the top of funnel or bottom funnel that's going to get me to convert. And I think the blending of the two within a DMP, within a platform, whether it's a partnership with like a company like an Adobe, you've got to take that, like that I think is a 101. As a small company, I think it's really tough to do. Have you guys done it on your end, like integrated your platform?
If one of these guys wants to build an ad tech and martech program, we'll buy it. So that answers your question. Absolutely, yeah. We've actually got a really smart group of people working on an attribution model for us internally, and it's almost like their weekly bane of existence that these two things don't speak to each other enough. So yes, absolutely, yes.
Excellent. I think I'm going to open it up to questions in the audience now. And so there's a question that we can start with.
So you talked about personalization at scale, and it seems like an oxymoron. And not on an advertising standpoint, but we're talking about travel, which is really about the consumer experience. So what does personalization at scale mean for the consumer experience of travel?
I mean, look, again, it starts with what is it exactly you're trying to do. So take an example, G Adventures, you're trying to sell, a discounted trip to, I don't know, Peru, okay? What could that look like? Well, if I were doing that and you called me and said, Alex, what's your best advice? I would go to some of the big rocks. I would go to Google or Facebook. Because with Facebook, you can very easily get list segmented data, okay? So what is that? And this is the trick, right? So you're gonna buy, it's gonna be cheap, you're gonna buy it on a CPA basis. But people buy on Facebook, right? And again, it's the example of, I like a Porsche, but I drive a Civic. So you're gonna have some wastage, but if you measure that and test it, and that's the trick, don't do it at scale, do it in micro moments, test regions, test geographies, test time of day, and then build that out. But then you've gotta work with the bigger players, or take that first party data, go to a company like StackAdapt, help them look at the lookalike and help them, like, because that's what these guys do, like they're able to give you that performance at scale, and I suspect that part of that model will include a test.
Thank you for,
Very nice plug.
yeah, I don't have to sell myself, that's great. But to add to your point on kind of, so when I was in Vegas, I attended I for Travel conference, which was really eye-opening because we had hundreds of different people, and all, mostly actually from revenue teams within travel industry, which gave a completely different perspective than marketing teams that we usually work with. So what they talked about was all about actually the experience after the booking, so that's why I'm talking a lot about it. And I think it's easy to get overwhelmed when you talk about how would we do it at scale. Everything seems to be easy when you look, okay, well, yeah, we can do it for a group of 50 people, but how would we do it for 100 million people? Well, I think for earlier companies, you shouldn't try to do it at scale right off the bat. Do things that don't scale. That's what Paul Graham suggests, and I think that's great. Pick individual customers. Maybe 1 out of 100 customers, and just do something just exceptional for them, right? Maybe you're not going to be able to do it for everybody, but you can learn a ton. These customers will probably be booking with you forever, and you can probably get a ton of social love.
How do you get that discipline though? We're all trying to get as many customers as possible, pay the bills. How do you build that discipline to do what's right versus what you need to do for the bankroll?
It's a tough one. So we have hundreds of customers, and we go through these exercises where we write personalized car services to a lot of them, and that's tough. Like we would have maybe 10 people contributing to every car, so we need to put I can't even do the math, like 2,000 personalized notes, and that's very time consuming. But the ROI of these initiatives is insane. It costs us maybe $5 for a card and 10 minutes of each person's time, but then the customer will stay with us forever. So you just have to develop diligence.
And I think if you looked at it as a 70-20-10, right? Like obviously keep the lights on and do what you need to do to kind of keep the business afloat. But the biggest mistake companies make, whether it's travel or anybody, any tech, any startup, is focusing on exclusively on top line growth. Because when you do that, what you miss is that gem, that person that's going to have a lifetime value that will exceed the 10 discounts that you're selling up here. So I think if you segmented your business 2010, and then really spent a good amount of time learning to give them extraordinary experiences, hopefully that they share, hopefully that you see significant ROI, then maybe the next year you move to 80-20, or in 6 months you move to 80-20. But the one thing, and I think the benefit that tech companies like yours and certainly yours have versus say an Air Canada or even a Marriott, is that you'll have in-house teams that can be much more agile and faster. You can just do it faster and learn faster, and instead of waiting 2 years to implement, you're able to do that in 2 months, right?
I was just going to say we're running a lot of tests and a lot of experiments with our platform, trying to understand exactly what drives people, what makes them buy more, what makes them buy less, what makes them buy more often. And one of the things that we keep talking about is what is the type of company that we want to be? Do we want to be in the business of just making shitloads of money? And if you talk to the market or publicly traded company, hell yeah. But at the end of the day, we ran a test recently that showed that we introduced a tool for the people that are buying points, digital currency on our platform, and we found that we give them this tool, we give them more visibility into what is it they're doing, and they're buying slightly less. So what do you do at that point? And I think at that, what you do then is you go back to first principles and you look to your gut and the kind of culture of the company that you're trying to build and work for, and you draw from there. And again, maybe, I mean, we're lucky, we've been around for a long time, and you know, the lights are going to be on whether or not we implement this feature or not. But I think culture has a lot to do with how you make decisions in situations.
So when we think of transactions, it's generally one-to-one. But if we look at travel, it's single, it's couple, it's family, it's group. How does personalization enter into each of those equations?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my answer's going to be perfect, but I do think that there's some level of pattern recognition that you can look at and profiling with, customers that, perhaps are looking for a group, or customers that are perhaps looking for a family, and profiling those. I know we talked a little bit about AI and the predictive area, but I think in MarTech, one of the biggest growth areas is predictive analytics. I just read today, Amex and Axiom did this deal where the results aren't there, but what they're actually looking at is they're taking credit card data, anonymizing it, developing segments, and trying to figure out, who's that person that's going to buy a bike? That's you. Great. Okay, what is it about your profile? And then building that out, and then selling that to companies that want to sell bikes. Family travel. I mean, I'm sure there's more experts on that, but I think one of the things that predictive analytics will be able to do is help figure out those moments. And also, I mean, linking the behavioral, like in the old days, it would be, well, if someone's looking for wedding planning and we're cooking them and we understand that that's what they're doing, and then they're going on a travel site, ding, 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 they're booking, or it's a honeymoon or a wedding, right? So they would make that kind of probabilistic determination, and then they would test and see whether that converts. And if it does convert, then they actually are able to build a profile based on some intent. Search works exactly the same, as you know.
Do you want to know how you could do that in 5 minutes? Facebook. It's straight up map someone who's got kids if you want to sell them Disney. So it's that easy if you want it to be like that transactional straight away. But this transcends ad tech, and it even transcends digital, because Disney, as an example, have been doing this for 20, 30 years, even before ad tech even started. So I would say there is really tactical ways of doing it immediately. The influencer market's another one. That's huge actually for, if you're looking at, for example, I read a statistic that kids don't even know who some sports stars are, but they know who every YouTube star is. So if you're trying to sell someone child experience, and I'm just using children as an example again, if you're trying to market to a couple and you think that in that kind of an interaction the female would be the decision maker, you would probably serve the ad or content to that.
And as you know, Shane, Disney was one of our clients, and so Disney Resorts, and I'm just remembering this, 25% of Disney's television buy would go on YTV. And at the time it was dual mom and kid, but it was also kid, because what they wanted was the neg factor. They wanted the kids to, or the teens to sort of, drive part of that decision. So it's complicated and complex. Starts with why and what you're trying to reach.
So any questions?
So actually, I have a question. So say something that came up with second and third party data. Say that you're a travel agency or you're a travel publisher, and you have a lot of deep data about really valuable customers in the space, but you're not necessarily using it to market. How should you think about your own internal data and its value, and trading, opening, selling that data? Does anyone have any insights?
I think generally selling data is a tough business because it's only the how, right? If the data actually perform, if we take a step back and what is the purpose of data? Well, in the marketing context, it's probably about customer acquisition, right? So you have to prove that your data is somehow better than, for example, somebody else's data, like search data on Google. If it is better, great. you have good business on your hands. But the challenge is actually activating this data, right? How do you find partners that actually can make sense out of this data? Do you have enough of this data to be able to sell to multiple partners? And I think the reason why Google and Facebook are so successful is because they tie media and data. So I would say if you're sitting on a lot of great data, find how you can reach those users yourself.
Any other questions? Got one up here.
How do you target the buyer's next step? So we talked about how good Netflix and Amazon are, saying that you bought this, you also want this. And with travel, usually people are looking for new experiences. You have the customer that maybe wants to go to Cuba every year. But for the customer that just watched Terminator 2, and now they want to watch RoboCop, Netflix is very good at predicting that. For Amazon, the customer that bought a mouse now wants a keyboard. In the travel industry, where the customer just went to Vegas and now maybe they want to go to Tomorrowland, how do you predict that?
I'm not sure exactly how you predict it. I think there are many models. So I'll give you one piece of research. Google Think every year takes a look at intent on the top 10 places in the world that are showing interest. And typically, because they follow that over time, right? So they look for patterns. And that tends to convert, I think Google says 75% of the time. In other words, what they predict at the beginning of the fiscal, in terms of places like Iceland or, I don't know, Ecuador, whatever was on the list this year, tends to convert 75% of the time. Now, how do they validate that? I don't know, right? And Google doesn't tell us how they validate that. They give us some beautifully, some gorgeous looking research that sort of delivers that. But if you have a large enough database, so I certainly know they're Canada, there was a large enough database, Emirates, there was a large enough database that we were able to use some level of, the time it was a bit of bullshit, but now it's gotten better, right? Some kind of an algorithm or an analysis that says if you went to Dubai twice in the last year, this close apart, the chances are you're going to go to Dubai again for business or whatever, this many times, and they would predict that model. And it's similar to the way Netflix works. It's a database, and it's about pattern recognition.
So I'm going to try and be super tactical again. So are we talking about people who have already booked with you, or are we talking about lead generation and you want to find out where they want to go?
Let's go with people that booked already, because it's easy.
Okay, so the thing is, so we're talking, the panel's about ad tech, but this again transcends ad tech, because now you're talking about real CRM and actually communicating with your customers. So, for example, we try and be as, again, we're getting better, it's a huge focus of ours, but we're still quite good at being customer-centric. So as soon as you get back from a trip, we'll give you an email to say, how was it? And within there, it's really our main reason for finding out is obviously we want to find out exactly how the tour was. That's the only way we stay in business, is by giving people exceptional experiences. However, you can add, especially when someone's just come back from the trip, their senses are heightened, their emotions are running wild, they're still sharing pictures on Instagram, that's the time you can say to them, so where are you going next? And the thing is, customers are now used to that interactive communication anyway, so that one I actually think that we could probably get into how that is going to look in the future. Like, do we start getting messenger apps involved and make it automated? But if it's just straight up, how does that work at the moment? There are mechanisms to do that. It's just how much of a priority we're making it. Because I think it was Alex who said before, you can't just be chasing top funnel all the time. You got to be looking further down as well. So that's what that one is. And then, sorry, just with lead generation as well. For example, we know we have a product that people aspire to experience. So one of our lead generation tactics will be to put that as the contact, but the whole activity is about finding out more about these potential customers. So as you're going through a contest, we're actually capturing that data on you all the time. And one of those pieces of data might be, where do you want to go next?
I was going to say, from selfishly, again, if the loyalty account that you have can tell you a lot about what the user is trying to do and where they're going next. So we're working with one of our partners now that wants us to build a tool where it's going to be the user that will tell us where they want to go, and we're going to help them get there by giving them different offers about how to earn loyalty points so they can redeem for that trip and whatnot. So I think it goes back to just ask them where are they going next, and if you give them tools and if you give them the things to help them get there faster, then they will they'll be more than willing to share, I think.
Just I'll wrap up this question. I think predicting travel is very difficult. Just because somebody went to Berlin twice in 1 year doesn't mean that they'll go again next year. I think what you should be looking at is certain triggers within that journey that will indicate to you that they might be interested in going back to Berlin, for example. So if you're sending a newsletter, did they open it and read that article? Maybe that's that first stage in them booking that trip. Are they reading articles across the web about things to do in Berlin? That can be an indicator. Have they Googled it and arrived at your website? Then you can retarget them. So I would look for just cues that signify that they're in early stages of looking for the trip instead of trying to predict when that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I know, at TravelTechTO we often look at Google traffic, and then we look at what's happening in certain pages and what the traffic's doing there. We're looking at a number of different things to kind of predict what destination is going to be the next hot destination out there. And it's tricky because you roll the dice, you go, okay, that's the destination everyone's searching, and you're hoping in 3 to 6 months they're going to convert, and you go for it, and hopefully you win on more than you lose, but you don't get everyone the right time. Travel also has another interesting aspect where there's political situations, there's volcanoes that erupt, and it can just destroy everything that you built, but you have to at least have enough backup plan there. So we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to ask the panel if you could just add one nugget of gold for this crowd about ad tech as a parting statement, just as advice for maybe if it's a tech startup or a budding marketer. What can you advise them moving forward in the ad tech sphere?
I would say for people who are new to ad tech, I think if you Google ad tech, you will find immediately these massive luminoscapes indicating there's thousands of players, there's videos, overcomplicating the system. There's a lot of business in making it complex, but in reality it's a lot more simple. So just look at it from fundamentals. What is it trying to solve for you? And hopefully that will guide you towards a partner that can work with you.
Yeah, and I would add, my parting thought. So a product is what you create, a brand is what the consumer tells you it is, and travel is about inspiration, and it's about, and I think you made a really good point, everyone predicts going to Iceland, there's an earthquake or a volcano in Iceland that's dead. You've got to be agile, you've got to read the cues, you've got to really understand your consumer. I think the more you understand your consumer, the better you will be in working with ad tech companies. We didn't talk about this, but for every dollar you spend in ad tech, remember part of that dollar doesn't go against media, it goes against service. And there is a long tail, there is fraud, there's a lot of bullshit in it. And so I think the most important thing that I would say is really understand what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then test in small little tests, and see some results before you actually plow more money into it, no matter what it is, whether it's search, whether it's content, whether it's influencer, or whether it's programmatic.
It's not really a golden nugget. I think the thing that we've just been talking about this whole time, it's about moments, it's about delight, it's about understanding your customer, and I think it goes back to the 70-20-10. Deliver exceptional experiences to that 10%, and then it will spread like wildfire. But to just keep the customer sort of in your gut and your mind and your heart at all time.
I would say don't ever underestimate the power of focus. So I think one of the things is, so we've got 600 different itineraries across 7 continents. Peru's perennially our biggest seller. A month ago, we found out that the Peru Tourism Board was changing the way it was handing out Inca Trail permits. So we had to think on the fly. We used this blazed earth approach where everything was focused on Peru, and we sold 40% more Peru. So I think at the end of the day, ad tech is a vehicle to actually get consumers to purchase. But before you even decide what ad tech you're going to use, if you're even going to use it, obviously you have to have a plan. Then super marketing 101 here. But on top of that, just be okay to focus. Like, what's your priority right now? Is your priority to actually get bookings? Okay, cool. What's the biggest seller, or where's the biggest margin? Just make sure that your marketing and advertising is mapped into your actual business objectives. And you know what Vitaly said is true. If you Google any of these technologies or buzzwords, you're going to get so many different companies serving you their solution. And like sometimes again, the loyalty guy just said, use your gut, because some of the things that they're going to try and sell you, you don't even use yourself as a consumer. And then suddenly you think that if I use this technology, someone's going to use it as a purchaser of my product. Probably not going to happen.
He quoted me.
I did.
Well, that's our panel for tonight. I just want to make sure we give a big hand of applause to our panel.